couple of things I want to make mention of. This is a shift. Isaiah 13 is an oracle against Babylon. And Babylon's not even in the picture. All right? What I mean by that is you have Assyria is in control right now. And what we find out with the historical context of Isaiah 13, let me give you a little bit of that. From chapter 13 to chapter 23, that's a completely different section. And it's what it does is it contains oracles against different nations. Okay? Starting off with Babylon. And what we're going to see is everything's been divided into sections in Isaiah. If we look at this, what we're going to do is we're looking at judgments that God is pronouncing against all these people, and he's showing his sovereignty over all the nations, not just Israel. And that's kind of important. The reason being is because the people of that day and age thought God was territorial. You know what I mean by that? How many of y'all remember Hophni and Phinehas? The sons of Eli. Anybody remember them? Okay. They were rascals. All right, bad rascals. There was a war between them and the Philistines, and they decided they were going to take the Ark of the Covenant out into battle with them. All right. Now, over in 1 Samuel 4, verse 6 through 8, when the Philistines learned that the Ark had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. They said, God is coming to the camp. They said, oh, no, nothing like this has happened before. We're doomed. Who's going to deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods that brought them, that struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plague in the wilderness. And what we see here, let me back up a second. What we see here is that people had the tendency to put God in the box, literally. You know, they thought he was in the Ark of the Covenant, all right? And they were bringing God into battle. And that's what the Philistines thought. And so that's what people all throughout old history thought. They believed that God was territorial. And what God is doing in Isaiah and all throughout the Old Testament, he's showing, no, there's no other God beside me. Okay? I'm the head honcho. I am sovereign among all the nations. And so that's what we're seeing here in chapter 13. Now, the writing here, it began 8th century, up here it says 740 to 681 BC. If you'll remember, Isaiah began his prophecy in the year that Uzziah died. Jotham took over. He's writing now. Ahaz is in the picture. He's the one who is ruling over Israel and everything else. Hezekiah is going to come a little later. But this is what we're looking at here time-wise. And so what we see at this time, Assyria, not Babylon, Assyria is the powerhouse in the nation. And in his lifetime, they were the dominant party or dominant power in the kingdom. And the northern kingdom fell about 722 BC. All right, northern kingdom of Israel. Assyria came in, if you'll remember, northern Israel, they carried them off into captivity. The Assyrians did. And Judah was under constant threat. That's why Ahaz was wanting to try to make an alliance with Assyria. And back over in chapter 7, verse 14, God said, wait a minute. There's going to be a child born to this young woman, or this, later on Matthew calls it a virgin. This 14 out applies it to Jesus. But there's going to be this child born before he knows right from wrong. Assyria is going to be taken care of, Ahaz. All right? So that's who the problem is, who we're dealing with right now. So when Isaiah is making this prophecy, Babylon is not even the dominant force. Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, and all those guys, they weren't there. As a matter of fact, later on in 612 BC, that's when they were going to take over Assyria. And then, in 586 BC, that's when they're going to destroy Jerusalem. So what we're looking at here, the time elapsed is Isaiah made this prophecy here in chapter 13 about between 740 and 700 AD, or BC rather, all right? Then the fall of Babylon didn't take place until 539. And so what we're looking at here, between the time of this prophecy and the actual fall of Babylon, between 160 and 200 years. So he is saying this about Babylon's fall way before Babylon even becomes a powerhouse in the country. So this is a prophecy talking about what's going to happen. The Jews aren't even thinking about Babylon right now. They're worried about Assyria. Okay? Now, literary context of Isaiah 13, what we see here is in chapter 1 through 12, which is the first section, it focuses on God's judgment and restoration of Judah. If you'll remember, God's talking about how Judah, the southern kingdom, is going to be destroyed. And yet there's going to be a remnant of people who God is going to preserve, going to take care of. Why? Because they're the ones who didn't breach the covenant with him. They followed him. They tried to obey his laws, which is, Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal. They were covenant people, and they tried to remain faithful to the covenant as much as they could. Chapter 13 through 23, it shifts. And God's judgment is now not against Judah or Jerusalem, but it's against all these other nations around here. And he's showing he's sovereign over all people, not just Israel, like the Philistines thought. All right. So 13 and 14, the oracle against Babylon begins in Isaiah 13. It continues all the way through 14. And that's where we're going to see Babylon's downfall contrasted with Israel's future restoration. Israel's going to be judged, 1 through 12. Babylon's going to fall, all right? 13 through 23, or 13 and 14 rather, and Israel's going to be restored. That's what we're looking at here. So the prophecy of Isaiah's that he gives here about Babylon's destruction shows that no human empire, no matter where it's at, no matter what time frame, no matter where, no matter how powerful, can stand against God's judgment. And that holds true today, whether it be China, Russia, United States, wherever. None of them are going to be able to withstand God's power when he decides to pull the plug. All right? Theological context of Isaiah 13. It introduces this major theme in the Bible. The day of the Lord. First time you hear about this, the day of the Lord. And the day of the Lord represents God's intervention. He's decided that he is going to move into history, and he's going to bring judgment on wicked people and going to bring salvation to his people. That's the day of the Lord. Judgment and salvation. And what he's doing is he's using nations as his instruments. Could God do what he did to Sodom and Gomorrah? Just rain down fire from heaven and destroy it? Sure, he could. Which he did, and he does. But here what he's saying is this nation over here, as wicked as it is, I'm going to use them to bring judgment upon my people. They don't know it, but they're my tool. All right? So Babylon used to punish Judah 100 some other years later. But in turn, what God does is he raises up the Medes and the Persians to punish Babylon later on. All right? So even the tool of God, over in Romans 13, we all talk about that. Let every soul be subject to the powers of the higher powers, because none of them exist except God put them there. And what are they there for? Well, they're there to protect the good and punish the evil. All right? That's the covenant that God has made with the nations. Governments are there to protect good people and bring justice against the evil people. What happens when the government flips over and they're oppressing the good people and they're just as evil as the one they're supposed to be protecting people from? Okay? When that covenant is breached, they've broken the covenant with God, then judgment's going to come on that nation sooner or later. So God uses the Medes and the Persians to punish Babylon later on down the line. All right? The immediate fulfillment of this prophecy was the fall of Babylon to the Medes and the Persians. But the imagery of the divine judgment is broad. All right? It's what we call an eschatological application later on in the scriptures. Now, $40 words that we preachers throw around to make people think we're smart. One of them is eschatology. Anybody know what that means? Didn't think so. But I'm going to make it simple for you. It's the doctrine of last things. Okay? the last things. You hear a lot of people today talking about the Lord coming, second coming of Christ and all that. That's an eschatological event. That's the last thing. That's the last day of the end of days, all right? And they talk about us being in the end days. Eschatology is simply a $40 word that talks about the end of time, the end of things, all right? Whether it be humanity, whether it be nations, whatever, okay? Isaiah 13, now we're going to get into it. Oracle against Babylon. And as we look at this, it just starts right off here. It's a prophecy against Babylon that Isaiah the son of Amos saw. All right? First thing he does in verses 2 through 5 is he is summoning the armies for divine judgment, okay, against Babylon. Now remember, this is 160 some odd years before this ever happens. Babylon's not even a power. But it says, raise a banner on a bare hilltop. Shout to them. Beckon them to enter the gates of the nobles. The idea of raising the banner. I used this here a couple of weeks ago. Remember in the movie Patriot, Mel Gibson's got the flag and he's waving it back and forth trying to get everybody to rally to the flag. It's okay, they can go get the British. That's what we're talking about here. They used flags to signal where to meet, where to muster up, so they can go and continue with the battle. And that's what God is saying here. Raise a banner on the barren hilltops, shout to them, beckon to them to enter the gates. He's saying, shout to my tools that I am going to use. All right? I have commanded those I prepare for battle. I have summoned my warriors for what purpose? To carry out my wrath. Those who rejoice in my triumph. All right? There's going to be people who rejoice in God's triumph over Babylon, definitely. But he's calling upon nations to come here. Well, what nations? Well, listen, a noise on the mountains, like that of a great multitude. Listen, an uproar among the kingdoms, like nations massing together. The Lord Almighty is mustering an army for war. It's not just the Medes and the Persians who are getting together to go against Babylon. God is bringing them together and setting up the stage. That's why when we look at world history, we need to look with the eye fixed on God. Let me ask you this. When you look at anything going on in the world around you, do you ever look at it with, in the back of your mind, thinking about how's God fit in this? I'm going to suggest you start doing that. I don't care if you're watching a TV show, watching a movie, whatever it might be. Picture God when you're doing that, because it's what we call, I've talked about it before, God winks. If you start seeing God in everything around you, you develop a habit. And that habit is to recognize God, his omnipotence, his omniscience, and everything about God. When you start looking at things around you and say, well, how's God involved in this? Just like in James when he talks about we're consider it all joy when you fall into different trials. And the idea is you're patient, you're looking at God, waiting to see what God is going to do with this problem. Okay? So, the Lord Almighty is the one who's bringing these armies together. What do? Well, they come from faraway lands, from the ends of the heavens, the Lord, the weapons of his wrath to destroy the whole country. He's still talking about Babylon. Raise a banner on a bare hilltop, shout to them, beckon them to enter the gates of the nobles. Repeated that. This is what we're getting at. God is calling and mustering the armies together to go against Babylon. Verse 6 through 16 is the judgment of Babylon. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Because of this, all hands will go limp, the Babylonians. All hands will go limp. Every heart will melt with fear. Terror will seize them. Pain and anguish will grip them. They will writhe like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at each other, and their faces are aflame. So what we're looking at here is there's going to be terror in the day of the Lord. People are going to be afraid of what is coming. Now, I'll guarantee you, if did anybody ever see that movie? Oh goodness, can't even think of the name of it now. It had Patrick Swayze in it. I made a remake of it. Red Dawn. The movie Red Dawn. It's where in America you have all these kids who are getting together and they're in school and what have you, and all of a sudden they start seeing paratroopers landing. And the paratroopers land, and the next thing you know, they're killing all the people around them and all that. America has been invaded, all right? And everybody is terrified about what's going on. How are we going to survive this and what have you? And it just, the whole movie is about America being taken over, all right? And there's fear going on. Picture that. When you see these Assyrian soldiers coming in, or the Persian soldiers coming in against Babylon, they're going to be terrified. Why? Because it's the day of the Lord. And the day will be multiple days, to be honest with you, but it's the day of the Lord's judgment, okay? See, the day of the Lord is coming. It's going to be a cruel day, he says, with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. God doesn't just destroy for the sake of destroying. He comes in judgment against sin. Now notice he says, the stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. Cosmic disturbance. Well, what are we talking about here? Well, this verse 10 is what we call judgment language. All right? And judgment language is used all throughout the Bible when he's bringing judgment. The heavens and their constellations are not going to show their light. The sun's going to be darkened. The moon's not going to give its light. You'll hear the sun, the moon's going to turn to blood, and what have you. Let me ask you this. When you see a battle going on, and people are bombing everything, and what have you, and everything is on fire, what comes up out of the fire? Huh? Smoke. What does smoke do? It ascends. And then it covers everything. You won't see the stars. You won't see the sun. It might turn, the sun might look blood red. The moon might look blood red, shining through all that smoke and everything else. This is judgment language that Paul is using. That Isaiah is using. And he's saying with the stars, the constellations are not going to show their light. He doesn't mean he's going to flip a switch and turn them off. All right. Sun's going to be darkened. No, he's not going to dim it like that. When the smoke rises up from the destruction that he is doing against Babylon, this is what we're looking at here. It's kind of a metaphor, if you will, for the battle and the results of what happens here. All right. So that's what's taking place here. Then, God's punishment on the wicked. It says, I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sins. Why is he coming against Babylon? Because they're evil. But wait a minute, God, you use them as a tool. Yeah, I use them as a tool, but they broke the covenant. They went after the helpless, the defenseless, and everything else, and they took glee in what they were doing. I'm going to put an end to their arrogance and haughtiness. It will humble the pride of the ruthlessness. Oh boy, we sure got them over there when we took out Osama bin Laden, didn't we? And look at how many Hamas we knocked out and all that. Look at how powerful we are. No. When God says you're going to fall, you're going to fall. All right? Don't take pride in anything that you have, because God says, I'm going to humble you. I'm going to make people scarcer than pure gold and more rare than the gold of Ophir. Therefore, I will make the heavens tremble, the earth shake from its place at the wrath of the Lord Almighty in the day of his burning anger. The idea, once again, shaking. What would it be like to see hundreds of chariots and horses coming at you? Do you think there would be a rumbling in the sound going on? Yeah, definitely, And so this is what we're talking about here. God is going to bring judgment and punish who? Righteous? No, wicked. Babylonians, who are not only his people, and covenant people, but these are people that was his tool, and they were gleefully going out here and murdering, slaughtering these people. Again, 160 some odd years, this prophecy before that actually takes place, all right? Like a hunted gazelle, the sheep without a shepherd, they will all return to their own people. They will flee to the native lands. Whoever is captured will be thrust through. Okay, all who are caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. The houses will be looted and their wives violated. Now, God's not saying I'm sending them to do that. God is saying this is what's going to happen. Okay, He knows what's going to happen. The land of the Babylonians is going to be desolate. It's going to be laid to waste. Now, who's going to do this? Well, it's the Medes and the Persians. They are not even in the picture yet. That they exist, but they're not a powerhouse, all right? So verse 17 and 18, he says, "See, I'm going to stir up against them the Medes, who do not care for silver and have no delight in gold." Why? We're a warrior tribe. You know, we enjoy fighting. You ever have anybody that you went to school with, kids that maybe in high school, junior high, or something like that, they just like fight? Wasn't you, was it, Walter? Yeah, just enjoy fighting. I remember Jerry Blackstone when I was in school. That's the way he was. But anyway, it says their bows are going to strike down the young men. They'll have no mercy on infants, nor will they look with compassion on children. When these people come, entire bloodlines are going to be wiped out, is what God is letting these people know. And it's the Medes who are going to be doing this. Okay? Over in Daniel, 5th chapter, verse 28. If you'll remember Belshazzar, that writing on the wall thing, meaning anything. The writing on the wall predicted that Babylon would be handed over to the Medes and the Persians. Your kingdom is divided. It's going to be given to the Medes and the Persians. That's what he's telling Belshazzar. And the whole thing in a nutshell was that 160 years before this, Isaiah is saying this is what's going to happen. By the time we get over to Daniel, it's during that period of time in captivity when Daniel reminds them, this is what's going to take place with you. All right? So next we have the complete destruction and desolation of Babylon in verse 19 through 22. Now we're getting through this pretty quick today. Babylon, verse 19, the jewel of the kingdoms, the pride and glory of the Babylonians will be overthrown by God like Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? Sodom and Gomorrah ceased to exist. Nobody even knows where it was. All right? It ceases to exist. Now, there are people who think that they found signs of where Sodom and Gomorrah might have been. Archaeologists and things like that have done that. But Sodom and Gomorrah were wiped out. All right? And so what he's saying here, Babylon is going to be overthrown by God, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. In Sodom and Gomorrah, I use fire and brimstone. The Babylonians, my fire and brimstone is going to be the Medes and the Persians. All right? She, Babylon, will never be inhabited or live in through all generations. Let's think about that. You're saying, wait a minute, Babylon exists. Well, hold on a second. There'll be no nomads will pitch their tent there, no shepherds will rest their flock, but desert creatures will lie there. Jackals will fill their houses. The owls will dwell, and the wild goats will leap about. Hyenas will inhabit her strongholds. Jackals in her luxurious places. Her time is at hand, and her days will not be prolonged. 160 years before, Isaiah is saying the time is at hand. They haven't even risen up and come against Judah yet. All right? But this is what God is saying here. All right? What about Babylon? Well, today, y'all remember Saddam Hussein? Modern Iraq contains the ruins of ancient Babylon. But it's never returned to the glory that it had before that. You read history, you ever hear of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon? one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. No one knows where it is or where it was. All right. The only thing that remained in Babylon was what they call the Lion's Gate, which is the turquoise thing that has the two lions on it. That's one wall, kind of like in Jerusalem. When they destroyed Jerusalem, they left the Wailing Wall there. Okay? And so this is what we're looking at here. Now, back in the 1980s, Saddam Hussein tried to rebuild parts of Babylon. Didn't work. He couldn't rebuild it. God said nothing's going to happen there, all right? So what happens is when we talk about Babylon today, it's basically just a place of history. You can go there and you can look at some of the artifacts that they find and what have you, but it's not a thriving metropolis like it was before God destroyed it, all right? And it never will be. If it does, then we have a false prophecy. And you have a lot of people today saying that, Babylon's still there. No, ancient Babylon is gone. It's a museum, all right? Nobody lives there any longer. And no major civilization anywhere throughout history since this took place revived Babylon as a capital city that's going to align with Isaiah's prophecy. Okay, nobody did that. Oop. Thought I turned it up, but I turned it back on for a reason. I don't know what it was. All right. Summary. Let's bring it down to themes of what we're looking at here. Sovereignty of God. Have you ever heard that one going through Isaiah, Jeremiah? God is sovereign. He wants people to understand that. I am in control is what God keeps telling his people. When he's not a God in a box. He doesn't dwell inside temples that's made with human hands. God is the God of the entire cosmos. Everything that we know and we don't know. He is the originator, the creator, and everything is under his thumb. He is sovereign. Understand that. No political power on the face of the earth is more powerful than the sovereign God. Every political power on the face of the earth will bow down to God someday. All right. Read the book of Revelation. When you see Revelation, you see the old serpent who is coming forth trying to devour the child of the woman, which is Christ. 2 verses, boom, it's over with. So he goes and stands by the seashore. And this beast from the sea comes forth. There in chapter 13, I think it is, beast from the sea comes forth. Beast from the sea is representative of all corrupt civil governments. Okay? Beast from the land. Beast from the land is the philosophy that drives civil governments. Okay? Whether it be communism, whether it be the fascism, whether it be democracy, whatever, all of these things that drive civil government are going to someday fall. We came close to seeing the philosophy of democracy or a republic falling. It still might. I mean, look at what happened to Rome. It was a republic. It fell. We can fall, right? But God is sovereign. It doesn't make any difference. When the philosophy falls, the government falls. All right? And God's philosophy is obey me, follow my guidelines, because I am the boss. I'm sovereign. All right? The day of the Lord. Isaiah is presented as a time of wrath. The day of the Lord is judgment day. And we keep talking about, the second coming of Christ. Well, that's the second physical coming of Christ. That'll be the last day. When Christ comes again, shout of archangels, trump of God, and all the righteous are going to be caught up to meet with him in the air, what have you. Peter says the earth and all the elements and everything in it is going to be burned up with a fervent heat. Everything's going to be destroyed. Evil, we're all going to stand before the judgment seat of God. The righteous, those who are righteous, are going to be judged by what they have done, which is, when I say that, what I have done is I've been united with Christ. All right? And so that being united with Him. It's not talking about my sin. When I ask God to forgive me, does He forgive my sins? Yeah. So, He'll forgive me, but I can't continue living sin. All right. If I'm doing that, then I'm not following the dictates of what Christ wants. So it's the lifestyle. If I live my lifestyle the way I want to, I'm going to lose it. But if I live according to God's will, then I'm going to find that eternal life. I want to be judged by what I've done in my relationship to Christ. Others are going to be judged because they are not related to Christ. And there's where the damnation comes in. Wrath is going to come. And of course, we're talking about eschatology. The evil will dwell forever and ever. Fire prepared for Satan and his angels. Judgment. Won't be a pretty picture, all right? There's going to be a certainty of judgment against the proud. What I mean by that is the Babylonians were proud because they were the powerhouse. Every nation would bow down before them. The powerhouse could even fall. That's what he's saying 160 years before it happens. The powerhouse will fall. Every nation, when it loses its philosophy, falls to another nation. And they gain another philosophy. The Medes and the Persians are going to come in, destroy Babylon, and that's exactly what happens. Why? Because they were arrogant. Look at me. I'm the biggest bully in school. No, there's always someone bigger. Jerry Blackstone, when I was a kid in school, loved to fight. He would pick a fight every day, and he would whip people every day until one day Kenneth Wooten showed up. When Kenneth Wooten showed up, Jerry Blackstone got his file cleaned. All right? And so what I'm saying, there's always somebody bigger, always somebody stronger, and God uses nations. He'll raise them up to be bigger. He'll make them stronger, and He will judge against those who stand against Him, the proud nations. All right? The Medes and Persians were the divine instruments of wrath. And when we look at that, God uses other nations to bring nations down. All right? Germany. You think Nazism. Well, Nazism was brought down because it was a fascist regime. We're the most powerful on the planet. We are different than everybody else. We're proud. We're haughty and what have you. Nazism was crushed back then. Nazism and Germany switched over to capitalistic states, all right, which is basically what they are now. Their philosophy of Nazism went by the wayside. Why? Because God brought nations together to destroy it. All right? God can do that against anybody in every nation. All right? So God uses nations to bring about His divine wrath. We should think about that. If this country goes so far downhill that they are bringing God's wrath upon them, it would be nothing to have other nations come up against the United States and bring us to our knees. Just saying, all right? Now, guess what? That's Harold and Walter, by the way. And yes, I'm through. We're going to get into 14 next week. All right?